It's Julia Renee.
And Kendall Aaliyah. Welcome back to the Know Your Power podcast.
Hey, y'all.
Hey, y'all.
Welcome back.
What's up?
No crickets this week.
Thankfully.
Oh, God. I was honestly so, I get really fixated on, if things don't go perfectly sometimes.
Yeah.
And I was like, everyone's going to be so mad at us. Oh, my God, we should refill. I was so mad at Chloe. I was like, Chloe, you messed
Big
it up. Nobody cared.
Energy.
No one
cared. And I appreciate you guys for not caring.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Because sometimes we don't mean to do something or say something or pronounce something wrong.
Oh, yeah,
and
guys.
I feel like I get the way you get preemptively nervous about it, having a reaction. Once the reaction happens, I get super anxious to the point where I can't look at my phone for forever.
Okay, wait. Let me pre-plan, make sure it needs to be which is it's never going to happen. Nothing's ever going to be perfect. No, I know it, but that doesn't stop it from happening sometimes.
Yeah.
And you're the aftermath.
I'm la-di-da-di-da. Oh, people didn't like that? And then I freak out about it. We're opposite reactions.
Y'all are awesome, though. So thanks for being okay with our little crickets. We're actually back by popular demand. We're starting another bodybuilding series.
I'm excited for
It's going to be a 5-parter. And we did a series like this, I don't know, by this time, 2 years ago or something?
I was actually looking this morning, the last time we did a series was, I think, 2023. And now we're in 2025, so that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, we just, realized that we had been throwing so much, information at you guys that we wanted to just, chat too.
Yeah.
So we have, a good balance of doing both. So every Monday episode for the next 5 Monday episodes is going to be I renamed it this time. What did I name it?
Bodybuilding Blueprint.
The Bodybuilding Blueprint. So I still think our last series is a really good tool because we go into depth on picking a suit, picking a coach, stuff like that. And we're going to touch a little bit on that stuff in this series, but I wanted to kind of take it in a different direction so we can get even more information since, we're older, we're smarter, we're wiser. We've been through some things, you know, in these 2 years.
Learn from our mistakes and
our
wins.
Every time that I prep, I just learn more about bodybuilding that I wish I would have known when I started. And I'm if there's anyone out there that wants to compete in 2025, let's start here. So it's going to be your blueprint.
I feel like every prep I've ever done got easier, maybe not physically, but mentally for sure. Where I think being prepared and being mentally prepared for what to expect, that alone eases 90% of the issues you run into. So
exactly.
We're going to help you be prepared.
Be super, super prepared. So that's kind of what this first episode is on is, are you ready to compete? Is this sport actually for you? And I wanted to make this episode because the truth is it is not for everybody. Bodybuilding isn't for everybody.
Yeah.
But I also don't believe in gatekeeping this sport so that people don't try it. Mm-hmm. Everybody has a day one. And there are people that want to compete in shows and they just want to take their body to the next level, take their mind to the next level, and challenge themselves in a way that they've probably never done before and see what they're capable of. And maybe that's the only show they do, and then they're done. And I love that. And that I have a lot of my clients that are it's just a bucket list type thing that I want to do. And then there are some people that want to take it further than maybe they expected. And I started bodybuilding with the intention of kind of just seeing what my body was capable of. Yeah. Never intended to take it this far.
Look at you now.
Until I was hey,
I could actually do this thing.
I think I'm kind of good at this thing.
That's one of those things you'll never know until you do your first prep and until you step on your first stage, where even before I stepped on my first stage, I did a prep like up until being 3 weeks out, and then I pulled out. And even that wasn't the full experience. Like you need to step on stage to understand if it is something that you love or maybe you hate it. I know so many people who competed once thinking it was like gonna be for them, and it wasn't. And they didn't have a good time, and they didn't like being on stage, and that's okay.
And you'll never know if you don't try. And that's why I always tell people, I'm like, rent your first suit, because you don't know if you're going to like it.
Let's not heavy invest quite yet.
Yes. And then if you decide that you like it, invest in making a suit that's like more custom to you. So I wanted to dive in, like, what is actually required of you as a bodybuilder, physically and mentally. And the number one thing is discipline. And this is not just like typical discipline, like you're doing a summer cut. This is extreme.
Yeah.
And the word extreme is kind of used a lot in bodybuilding because you're pushing your mind and your body to its physical limit that you might not have done before. This isn't just a cut for summer where you're like, I'm going to lose a couple of pounds and I want to look good in a bikini. This is, I'm always fearful of using the like, I'm going to do whatever it takes mentality to get myself shredded, but it is sort of like that.
It does become that. For most people, unless you are super genetically gifted, you have to dig to very sometimes unhealthy measures to step on stage.
Exactly. And look, there, like Kendall was saying, like there are some people, like we've had friends that compete and they're on their peak week and they're barely doing any cardio and they're eating tons of food. There are people that are like that.
Julia and I are not.
We're just not one of them. I'm the eating very, very low calories, dangerously low calories, have very high amounts of cardio. My body just is like that. And I used to be almost like angry and like sort of jelly of the people that didn't have to, I guess, go to that extreme. But now I'm just like, you know what? This is just the cards that I have been dealt. And I know that I have strengths in other areas. Like I can build muscle like a mofo. And I'm, well, the grass is always greener. So taking into consideration how extreme the sport can get and that there are risks. There are definitely risks. And I don't say this because I want to scare you, but I want to say it just to make you aware. This isn't always a guarantee. These things might not be happening to you, but I have experienced a couple of these things. So, for example, dehydration and electrolyte imbalances, hormonal disruptions, especially with women. I think I talked about it a little bit in my prep, maybe on the pod, but my brain was not in the chat at the time. But I lose my period almost every prep at a certain point where I am training excessively and I am eating not enough to sustain the amount of training that I'm doing because I'm trying to get a level of physique that is unnatural, not sustainable, and isn't healthy. So I want to make that clear.
I also want to be clear. I feel like every time us or other bodybuilders talk about hormone imbalances, there's people out there being like, well, I'm natural, so that's not going to happen to me. It has nothing to do with that. Like it truly is like your estrogen levels are not high enough to sustain at a certain body fat percentage. So when you're lean enough and when you're not eating enough and when you're doing really high cardio, like you're going to disrupt your system, whether you're doing it a really holistic way, a really healthy way, like no matter what, it will affect you, even if it isn't to the degree of losing your period, like what has happened to us.
Yeah. Like I'll have a lot of girls that like, that'll reach out to me and ask me like, if that's normal, if like it's happened to me. And I'm like, but then like afterwards when I went through this whole journey on YouTube. If you guys want to watch my Off-Season Files YouTube series, I go into like what I was doing to help get my period back per my coach's recommendations. And I actually got my period back a lot faster this time around because I was more intentional about how I was doing it rather than just like waiting around.
Waiting for it to come back.
I'm like, and you know, of course, like when it did come back, I was like, I hate this. Why did I want it back? But having a healthy period is a sign that you are a healthy woman. So that is something that could happen. Nutrient deficiencies, muscle loss, and metabolic adaptation. I've talked about this a little bit on the podcast. And basically, it's like when you're pushing yourself to that level, your body doesn't want to go there and be there. That's why I really strain the words like, it's not sustainable. It's supposed to be for a short period of time. It's not healthy. Our body doesn't really want to get to that level of starvation. Like let's call it that. So it starts to become harder to lose that weight, and you have to start doing more cardio, or maybe eating less, or moving more, whatever it might be, to get that weight to come off. And I've talked to you guys about my diet breaks and stuff like that, where I took 2 years off from dieting, because the more that I found that I was doing it, the harder it became without having that adequate time in between. And my body at a certain point was like, we've been dieting for like 3-4 years straight with not enough break. Can we have a break? So this is a possibility that can happen. There's also health concerns with your heart, body dysmorphia, post-show blues, and like an unhealthy relationship with food. So which ones do you feel like you've, I don't know, maybe have experienced in your preps, or has it been a little bit of all?
I think all of them. I was going to say, like, one of the biggest things post-show for me, my last prep, which was like it's weird because this shouldn't affect me going back to bodybuilding, but it is something I'm concerned about. I never had acne growing up. And after my last prep, I think my hormones were just so confused and disturbed. And I didn't have sugar for so long that when I reintroduced that and other foods that inflame you, and dairy at the time, because I didn't know I was intolerant and all the things, I had such extreme cystic acne to the point where like I had to get on medication for that. I didn't want to leave my house anymore. Like if I can find a picture, I think I'll put it on the YouTube or the story. It was bad.
After the last time you competed was when we were at nationals.
Yeah. So I was thriving through the prep.
I didn't even notice, honestly. So
it was like, I would say like a month after competing, like once I was done and eating quote unquote normal again, like I think it was just my hormones trying to regulate. I had to get back onto birth control too, which not that I had to, but that was like a quick fix. And I just like was grasping at anything at the time. So that whole time period was just really rough. And that also ties into post-show blues and body dysmorphia and all the things. So those are probably like the biggest three I've dealt with, is like hormone imbalances, body dysmorphia, post-show blues. Yeah.
I would say this time around has been the best off season as part of like some of these things happening.
Yeah. So, I feel like you've been thriving just as someone who's watching you in post-show.
I mean, it's only because I've done it. I know that I'm just going to continue to get better and better and better at it. But one thing that I always like to say is that I feel like post-show is just as hard as prep, because the thing is, when you're on prep, you have a plan, you know what you need to do. And if you want to be successful, you just really have to follow the plan, versus when you're in off season, and if you don't have a coach, even if you do have a coach, you don't necessarily need to follow the plan. Yeah. Because there's nothing that you're tied to anymore.
Yeah, it's like there's no event holding you accountable.
Exactly. Like you have nothing to really hold yourself accountable other than yourself. And that's where things go out of whack. But we'll have a whole episode about that and like what we have done and how we've gotten better. But there's also like the sacrifices that you have to take in consideration. Like the sacrifices with maybe not seeing people as much. And this can go to, you know, you can still be social, and I'm a big fan of like trying to be as social as I can on prep. Yeah. For as long as I can, because just because you choose to do something like this doesn't mean your family and your friends should suffer. Yeah. And like not see you or not hear from you. So I try every year to be better and better at that, and not just like completely isolate myself.
I think trying to communicate too and explain, like if this is your first prep ever, I know we've said this before, but I try to stress it as much as possible. If the people around you have nothing tied to bodybuilding, they don't know what it's like, you can't expect them to just like pick up your new lifestyle. True. So you need to like fully explain to them what you're doing, why you're doing it. Here's the steps you're going to take. You're going to hit a point where you're going to be too fatigued to hang out. You can't really go out to eat at certain places unless you really plan your meals before and after. Like certain things, I think just setting expectations for yourself and the people around you, because I've lost friends because they didn't understand what I was doing and thought I was just excluding myself. Like I just stopped hanging out with them.
You didn't really like them or wanted to hang out with them when you were just, I'm focused on this goal.
I was like,
right
dude,
now.
I wish I could, but like right now my time and energy had to be on like training and cardio and meal prepping and not like going out at night the night before or whatever it was.
Yeah, you're like, cause I gotta wake up and do cardio. And a part of like the sacrifices too, it's that sometimes you genuinely just, the only thing that you have energy for is what's required of you for the show.
Yep.
Posing, cardio, training, waking up, doing again, eating your meals, like just existing at a certain point can get really difficult. I'm not saying it's always all like that, but those last, I'd say for me, it's 6 weeks out-ish. That's when it starts.
I always said 5 weeks.
Getting harder and harder to where you are, my family and friends kind of just know that every single day for me is going to look the same. And I'm not really going to see anybody, but like I'll still call my mom, call my dad and text him, but they know. They get it now, and that's because I've had the years of conversations, and that's something to consider too when you are thinking about doing it, is having these conversations with your family and your friends beforehand so that they know what to expect going forward, and then they can be hopefully as supportive as they can be.
Like my boyfriend has never even been to a bodybuilding show. He knows nothing about the sport. And like in the conversations of potentially stepping on stage again, I've had to have like no, I haven't decided. I'll let y'all know. I've had pretty extensive conversations of like, would you support me through this? This is what it's going to look like. I'm not going to have the energy for certain things that we do right now. But honestly, our lifestyle really ties into it still. I mean, I still train and eat and act like a bodybuilder. It's just taking it to that next level of like, I have to wake up for fasted cardio, so I can't stay up with you and watch a movie. True. Like certain things that you sacrifice at a certain point. And that ties into your next thing, which is like time commitment. It is a huge time commitment doing a prep and being post show and getting into this in general. If you guys are at a point where like maybe you haven't done a prep yet, but you've been considering it because you like have recently gotten into the gym and into your groove, look at what that looked like of going from not being in the gym to now prioritizing fitness. All of those steps, how much time all of that takes. Now take it like one step further and like extend all those time periods. Longer cardio, longer gym sessions, more meal prepping, because you have to be super meticulous. Like everything just takes a little bit longer.
Especially one thing too that I started realizing when I went into my off season and I didn't have to prep every single meal anywhere that I went. Like I was on prep when I would travel for like events or things like that. I had to add additional time to my packing and stuff like that because I couldn't just go anywhere whenever I wanted to and not worry about bringing my food with me. I had to plan out every single meal, how much it was going to be. I had to pack my scale. You know, I'd be traveling. Anybody on prep knows that I'm traveling with like a billion bags because I need to make sure that I have that taken care of wherever I do go. And this is why like some people are just like, I'm just not going to go anywhere, because it is, you know, it's a lot. Versus now, if I like go and do a trip to Houston to do a shoot with Buff Bunny or something, I can like pack a couple of snacks for the drive, and then that's fine.
Like stop if
I have
you
way
need to
more
stop.
time on my hands now. So yes, you have to consider the time that it's going to require of you, and that's going to be different for everybody.
For sure.
Just to give you guys an example, at like the height of my prep from like my first and second show of this past year, I was doing at least an hour. I was doing an hour of, at the highest amount, an hour of Stairmaster in the morning. And then I would go have 3 meals and I would do an hour at least of lifting. And depending on what I was training that day, 30 minutes to maybe 45 minutes of posing practice afterwards, plus 45 minutes of cardio. And then there would be days where I was like, okay, I'm just going to do my posing practice on my rest days instead so I can save a little bit of time. So just think about I'm not saying yours is going to be like that, but like, how are you going to fit that into your current lifestyle? And is it possible?
Yeah.
We've seen people like Sunny Andrews, who's like a nurse, right? And she gets it done.
Oh, she's a doctor, I think.
Yeah, she's a doctor.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. Dr. Sunny Andrews. Same thing with like her sister, Marissa Andrews.
Yeah.
She was going through med school to be a nurse, doctor as well. Yeah. And we have moms that have children to take care of that do it. So it's, if you really want to make time for it, you can. I have girls that are cops and they work nights. They still do it. Like, it's insane.
Badass.
So it's just about fitting it into your schedule. And then lastly, there's the financial commitment. Bodybuilding is expensive.
Yep. It's funny because like most sports are, but usually we stop sports after like high school and college.
Well, usually your parents are paying for like, if like, for example, if we're talking like you're doing a sport in middle school, you don't really, you don't
realize that like equipment costs money, your coaches cost money, like all of these traveling cost money. But like when you're an adult doing an adult sport, which is essentially what bodybuilding is, like you start to realize like, oh, all of these costs add up. Like bikinis are wildly expensive. You have to pay for your tan. You have to pay for your NPC card. You have to pay for registering for the show. Like everything has a price. So be prepared for that and budget in advance, because if you can't afford a coach if you can't afford a coach, there are other options, or there are more affordable coaching, or like a little less hands-on coaching. Like there are ways to get around and find like financial loopholes, but either way, it's an investment.
It is. And it's one of those sports where you only make money as a bodybuilder if you win pro shows. That's it.
It's like maybe the 1% of bodybuilders make money from bodybuilding.
That's it. So it's your, and that doesn't mean that it's not incredible, because you are investing in yourself and doing something that is super awesome and that might bring you so much joy if you end up really liking it. So you just have to take that into consideration with like tanning, shoes, makeup, hair. For girls, it's way more expensive. Shoes, competition shoes, posing practice, like paying someone to teach you how to pose. And like Kendall was saying, there's ways you can save money. Like I have makeup videos on show day makeup on my YouTube video. Like we've done episodes and both of us have little, do you have an Amazon one that has bodybuilding stuff on it? I think so.
I think I made one for the podcast.
Yeah. I have some too that's like cheaper options of all these things, which is always a good idea if you're doing it for the first time. It's like, I realized when I first started, I was like, I could have got this at Claire's.
No, literally, that's where I get all my jewelry.
No, literally. My favorite earrings that I've worn since I got my pro card, my pro debut, and my last 2 shows, I got at Claire's.
Yep, same.
And I loved them. And I was just like, I don't know where I got them at Claire's, and there's a lot of ways that you can save money. So now we're going to go over the different divisions. So this might take a little bit. Just remember that we're just going to go over the women. This is a girly podcast. So do you want to go over the fit model division? We're going to do these like relatively quickly and just try and gauge like which one you feel like is going to be a best fit for you. And
sometimes you're in between 2 of them and you don't know until you start prepping, where I thought I wanted to go wellness. I thought I didn't have the size for wellness. And then as I cut down, I started to see like my quads pop more, my size was more lower body dominant. I fit more into the wellness division, but I don't think I would have known that or like self-recognize that if I didn't have people around me, first off, like reassuring me that I was ready for wellness, and also like cutting down to a point of actually seeing my muscle mass. So sometimes you think you fit in a division, and when you start prepping, you're like, oh, maybe my glutes were actually body fat.
So there's that happened a lot when the wellness division first got announced, where people thought like, oh, I have big legs, I'll just fit into this category. And it's like you cut down and you're like, dang it, my glute, like, oh, dang it, this happened to me. I was like, my glutes aren't as big as I thought. And I was like, fuck.
Anyway, the first division is the fit model division. This is the new division that they recently added that we've talked about. So we don't really have an idea yet. This is just based on what they said it is. It's a balanced and symmetrical physique, toned and athletic, but not overly muscular or shredded. Soft conditioning, less muscle and definition than bikini, no visible tie-ins, small roundness to the delts, but not capped. So not like quite as hard
Yes.
as a bikini look. Presentation and posing, one foot in front of the other with the hip, beautiful, with the hips slightly tilted, and the back pose is the same as bikini. The suit has no bling or connectors, which I do feel like you need to consider because there's something fun about having the bling.
That is true, but also it's kind of cool because the bling is what costs the most.
That's true. This is the most affordable.
So this is going to be a very cost-effective division to compete in as well for your first time.
Yeah, and really not
that.
scary and intimidating because the posing routine is shorter and more simplified, where you just have a front and back pose. True. So the ideal competitor for the fit model division is women who are just getting started into bodybuilding. It's a great entry-level division. Maybe you don't want to wait until you have like a certain amount of muscle development to step on stage and you want to get started now. Like we were saying in the beginning, you don't know if you love bodybuilding until you step on a stage. Mm-hmm. So this is a great way to be like, let's just see. Let's just go have fun, see how I do. Mm-hmm. And then if you love it and you want to continue building into some of these other divisions, you'll have the time to do so.
I can't wait to I need to go to a bodybuilding show like soon because
let's find one.
I know. I'm like, we got to find, there has to be one like that's close because I just love watching people, especially like some of the local NPC shows. I love watching like how excited they get and watching their family and their friends like cheer them on and stuff. And then it makes me excited about my journey too. And I get super pumped. But I think the fit model division I'm so glad that they brought it because especially for this whole series that we're making, this is perfect. Yeah. Like this would be a really good one.
If you really don't know where to start, I feel like this is a safe place to start.
And as we are talking about each one of these divisions, just remember that as we go into each division, there's more muscle that's required. More muscle,
so
more
fit model's
muscle.
Like the entry level as far as like muscular development, and then next is bikini, and then it stacks from there.
And then we go up from there, and you also have to consider that the more that we go through these divisions, the longer it takes to get there. Yep. So the more time that it takes. Yep. So that's why you see people going from like maybe one to another and moving up. So the next one is the bikini division. So this one is like slightly more muscular than I don't think it's slightly. I think it's pretty significant. If I can see with the fit model they're judging, more muscle. They have an emphasis on like the glutes, the hamstrings with more like cap shoulders. They want to have like a balance and symmetry. So kind of think like an X frame. So when you think of like an X, you're like, okay, when you have the top and the bottom, it's balanced from top to bottom. No excessive amounts of muscle. They want you to be lean, but not like shredded. They don't want to see like striations or anything like that. A slight separation in the glutes and the hamstrings, not like you would see with like the wellness division where you see every little thing that's like etched in. And their presentation on stage, like they do have the glittery suits with the connectors and everything, but they only have the front and back pose, right? As far as mandatories.
They kind of have like a transition pose that I think every single bikini girl hits. Okay. While they specifically said for fit model, they don't want that transition.
Gotcha. You're right.
So it's like a little more pizzazz to the posing routine, but still not like quarter turns or anything.
Yeah. So then even as far as like presentation and pizzazz, it's like fit model, like pizzazz. Fit model, it's like a little bit less, which is also great because if you are new, and I know how I looked when I first started posing.
It was rough for me.
It was rough. It was rough. And then you go into bikini and you see a little bit more pizzazz. And then for some reason, like when we go into the wellness division, like there's even more pizzazz. I don't know what it is about the wellness division, but it's just like screams sensuality. You know what I mean? And I'm about it because I'm a part of that.
I enjoy watching it. Did you finish for bikini?
Yeah, that's bikini.
So wellness.
Wait. Oh, wait. So I feel like the ideal competitor for bikini is somebody that I don't want to say like more petite, but there's a theme that goes around with bikini is that a lot of the girls are naturally a little bit more petite. And
I would say petite in the way It's not that you don't have muscle mass or you don't have size, and some of the girls are tall, like not petite in that way, but petite in like the smaller rib cage, waistline, like that type of like just lean, long muscle does better in bikini.
Very true. Like if we just look at the standard right now, which is Laura Lee, she's a little bit taller and she just has long, lean muscles. Like to me, she kind of looks like ballerina-esque. You know what I mean? I feel like that really does well for the division. I'm curious what you think. Do you think there's like certain heights and sizes that just usually do better in certain divisions?
Not even height. I think just like body types where I tried to fit into bikini when I started and I'm simply just not a petite girl. Like
it's
I'm
almost
large.
Like we big boned. You know what I mean? I feel like we're big boned.
I'm like my knees are like wider than their quads. Like that's never gonna work for me. Even if I stopped training legs for like 6 months to try to go bikini, and they were like, you simply have too much size.
You simply cannot.
Simply cannot. So if you are someone who's like debating what division to go into, you might already have more muscle mass than what's needed for bikini, and you might have to cut back on training.
Yeah, and that's also something to consider. It's like, would you want to cut back a little bit and go into the bikini division and potentially change your training up, or take a little bit more time and grow into the wellness division?
Yeah, that was literally the exact contemplation I had when I was in between shows, because I was like, I could full on bulk for this wellness thing, but even then I'm risking then not being big enough. But I learned very quickly, I rather try to grow into a division and be a smaller person on stage, actively trying to become the big dog, instead of feeling like I had to cut back on my training and do like even more cardio. Because I was the same as you, where I was doing almost 2 hours a day at a certain point. And I probably would have had to do even more if I was trying to lose muscle mass at that point.
Yeah, and then like maybe even at a certain point, stop training some of your favorite things to train.
Yeah, that is something to consider with all of these. With like bikini, you get to kind of balance everything out. That's like the pro of it. When you go into a wellness, a figure, a woman's physique, like you have to get more meticulous with how and what you're training, which does tie into like, would you actually enjoy doing this division or not?
And that is more like, of course, long-term thinking. Because a lot of people ask me like, why don't you train upper body? And it's because of this reason, where my upper body is already at a point where I just need to hold it right there. I don't want it to be smaller. I don't want it to be bigger, because it's perfect for the division and for the standard. So I just like activate it, make sure that it doesn't disappear and disintegrate. And I'm like,
okay,
good. But the main focus is legs.
That sounds miserable to someone who loves training upper body. So which brings us to wellness. So wellness is an emphasis on the lower body, thicker quads, hamstrings, and glutes compared to the upper body. So while bikini's trying to make an X, wellness is kind of more of like a triangle.
I'm like Dorito. Almost
where
like
you want a really large, like you want imbalance. It is the only division where they want an imbalance between the upper and lower body, where you want to stay somewhat petite on top, almost like the bikini upper body, but a far more developed lower body. More muscle than bikini, but not as conditioned as women's physique or figure. So not as like striated, but definitely a little more hardness than what bikini wants. A softer look compared to figure, but leaner than bikini. Presentation and stage presence, this division has quarter turns like figure does. So this is the first time we're hitting a side pose. Bikini doesn't have like a true side pose. It's kind of more front and back. For wellness, it's front, side, back, other side, back to front. And the ideal competitor is someone with naturally stronger and more developed lower bodies, or genetically gifted in the lower body. Or you really love training lower body.
Or like you really just enjoy training lower body. Like I remember when I first started bodybuilding, I didn't know what division that I wanted to compete in. So I was just, and I had a really good base. I wasn't.
You could have crushed figure if you wanted to go into figure.
That's one thing that Zach always told me. He was like, if you ever wanted to go into figure, he's like, you would destroy. He's like, but you'd have to bring your legs down. I was like,
you were pretty deep in prep and we went to Houston, Julia hit this like lat spread for fun in the mirror. And I was like, holy crap, girl. Like you could go figure.
I know. This is why I don't train back very much anymore. Because like just genetically, I feel like in my family with the Hispanic women, we have like a little bit wider backs. Like you can see it through like my sister and my mom and my grandma, but we're also like petite at the same time. Like we're all pretty short.
Yeah.
And then of course we have like the hips and the legs. Like my grandma, she's got it, you know, but it's also genetics. This is why a lot of the Brazilians, like, they are the top 5 in the wellness division because it started in Brazil, for one, and genetically they gifted.
That's why I say, like, even if you feel like you aren't genetically gifted in your lower body, if you love training it enough, you can bring it up. Where I'm not saying like I am a standard wellness build, but like being a taller white girl with no hips, I've had to work really freaking hard to bring up my legs. That maybe would have been an easier process for someone who is maybe shorter or like puts on more easily, or if you're Julia.
Or Latina.
Yes.
You know?
So there is like, you can fight your genetics to a point. I know I could train as hard as possible for the rest of my life and not be built like Fran. Like, that's just impossible. So I think
you would look more like Angela Borges.
Yeah.
You know?
That's like a perfect example of someone who has a ton of muscle mass to combat some of the genetics of being like maybe taller and maybe more narrow hipped.
Yeah. And like, if we've explained this before, and if you put Kendall and I next to each other, you can see the difference in our muscle bellies. I'm short. I'm 5'2". You're 5'7", right? Yeah. Okay. So
that's crazy.
Right. So my muscle bellies are shorter. Yeah. Like, they're literally from like my knee to like my quad. It's a shorter distance.
Yeah.
Versus Kendall, like, there's so much distance. So just imagine what it's like to fill that area. That's one of the reasons why my quads look so massive, especially when I'm on stage, even next to girls that are different heights, because I have a lot of mass, but it's in a very small space. So it doesn't mean that I have like more muscle than everybody else, because these girls on stage are all insane, but I have the illusion of even more muscle mass because
you have a really good shape
tiny.
For wellness. Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be really fun if we're both shredded at the same time this year, because we could do like our posing next to each other and just show how different wellness physiques can be. That'd be fun.
Just patiently waiting and not.
It's my plan. It's my plan. I just don't know yet.
Pressing and getting too excited.
The comments were on the same boat as you.
I know. Everyone was like freaking out. For Kendall, she's like a cat where I'm like,
yeah, you can't approach me
Don't
too
approach
suddenly.
too quickly because she'll get scared, run away, and go under the bed.
Yeah, I have to come to you and be like, I'm doing this.
Yes, and then I'll be like, really? I didn't know. Okay, so let's talk about the figure division. So now we're getting into, we're still going up in muscularity, and we're also getting shredded and leaner. So for the figure category, there's more muscle development than bikini, than wellness, with like more of the emphasis on like the shoulder, back, legs. They're way more defined. So they kind of look for that V taper, and like they still want overall balance. So think of the X frame, to where shoulders and quads, like they're in that same line. And then with the conditioning, more shredded. Like as we're going up, we're getting more shredded, more striations, maybe some more separation too. And for figure, they have the classic figure posing with the quarter turn. So if you guys don't know what quarter turns are, just imagine that you're facing forward, looking at like a camera or something.
I'm also going to put pictures for those on YouTube.
Yeah.
So if you're listening on like Spotify or Apple and you're like, I need to see what some of these look like, just go to the YouTube video.
Yeah. And so the quarter turns, you'll hear the judges say quarter turn to the right. So you move in a clockwise fashion to the right. So you're facing forward, you move to the pose to the right, quarter turn to the right, you go to the back, and so on and so on. So wellness does this too, and wellness and figure both do this, but the required poses are, they're different for each division. So another thing as far as like the posing and presentation with figure is that their suits are different. So they have the back connectors that have the cross in the back.
I think their suits are really cool.
They're so cool. And the top, basically, it's still a two-piece, but the top connects to the bottom. So the top crosses over the glutes and then hooks onto the bottom.
I feel like it just shows more of the back muscles.
It really does.
Yeah.
It really
it helps the illusion even more.
It helps the illusion even more. So that's the figure division. I feel like the best, like, ideal competitor would be somebody that just, you want more muscle mass. Maybe even if you feel like just by you training, you're just man, I my back, I can build it like that. My shoulders, I can build them like crazy. Take that into consideration. And if you enjoy training upper body so much, like, why not see where you can take it? And I think one of the common misconceptions with figure is that you don't necessarily like train your lower body. I would say
girls' quads are still crazy.
Figure training wise is more balanced. Like the way in which they train is a little bit more balanced to where they are hitting all of the muscle groups, versus at a certain point in wellness, it's not really balanced, where I have 3 leg days a week. The other 2 days I'm doing like MMA or I'm doing jiu-jitsu or yoga because I don't need to train my back and my shoulders as much. I just need to make sure they're still there. So that's something to consider. Like, do I love training upper body?
I think a big difference too with the posing is this definitely is the first division for women where it's like more hard and muscular and quote unquote masculine, but like obviously still in a feminine way, where all of the divisions we talked to up until this point are kind of like femininized, where you're like doing pretty hand movements and like soft turns, versus like figure is a very like, boom, here's my front pose, like spreading your lats, showing your delts, getting to show your back muscles, which we kind of hide in the previous divisions.
Like the way that the fit model, bikini, and wellness pose, the actual poses are like quote unquote like more feminine and to accentuate like the hourglass shape. And with figure, their transitions and stuff, they are so like flowy and beautiful and fluid and very feminine in that way, but they actually get to like flare their lats.
They get to flex
and show. And then when they do their side pose, like you get to, you know what I mean? It's like, it's a really beautiful mix of the femininity of how they do their transitions in their hands and posing, and then into like, let me freaking open up and show you my Dorito back.
Yeah. So, it's always crazy too, because like so their lats are always like normal. And then when they like flare until front pose, you're like, where did those come
It's
from?
literally like a bird who's like opening its wings, and you're like, holy crap.
I love figure poses. I unfortunately suck at them. So like I've tried just for fun, and that doesn't hurt too, is like play around with the different poses, see where your physique lies while you're hitting these front poses. Cause that'll show you too. Like if you have a really hard time holding a certain position or a pose, or you don't love how your physique looks in it, that might be a sign in itself that like maybe that division isn't for you yet or right now.
Maybe something you need to build into.
Yeah. The next one we have is women's physique. So this one, I would say like the way I always explain it to people is like picture figure, but like even more muscle mass,
more muscle,
everywhere.
more shredded.
Where some of these women, like I think when people think of like women's bodybuilding, they actually think of women's physique, like that really muscular. They get to hit more of those like front double bis and back double bis. Like it is like, I love their posing so much. Because, it's so fun to watch.
Yes, they actually get a song and a routine, and they don't have to wear heels, correct?
Oh, mate. Yeah,
I don't think they have to wear.
Right.
They don't have to wear heels because they're doing like a routine. Like if you guys see C-Bum, you know, when he walks out and he has a song and he gets to do a full thing. This is the women, like the first women's division that gets to do that, and then women's bodybuilding really does.
Cool. I know. So more muscle mass than figure, symmetry and shape, focused on overall proportions, top to bottom, the same way figure would be. Again, like kind of aligning that like cap delt with those quads, but both have to be even bigger to align in that way. Conditioning, visible separations and some striations. Posing routine required. Competitors perform a choreographed routine to music, which is what you were just saying. And the suit has the same look to figure, where it is like still a separate top and bottom, but they are connected through the cross in the back. The ideal competitor for this is women who love muscle and want to showcase more size and conditioning than figure. So like this is the first division for women where you get to like actually come up and like flex your bicep, which again, I love watching so much because it's so like badass.
Just like, I mean, it would be just so cool if in the middle of like a wellness routine, bikini routine, if someone was just like,
like just, you know what I mean? Like muscular.
You know, because I know a lot of competitors that are in these divisions where we can't really do that because it's, because of the division, we want to, like, we have the muscle, we just have to present it in a different way.
You have to pretend it's not there a little bit, but
especially
it is there.
in wellness, it's like kind of like it's there, but it's not there. You can't show too much.
You don't flex your upper body literally at all in wellness versus like figure and woman's physique tie into that.
I know, which is so awesome. So those are the divisions, kind of figure out which one that you feel like you would fit well in, considering all of the factors. Like, how do you like to train? What are your genetics like? Even if you have a coach, asking your coach which division that you would fit best in, consider the amount of time it might take to have the muscle development to compete in that division. So after all of those things, look at photos, even if you're looking at photos of like the standard for the Olympia in each one of those divisions, look at it more so in could I potentially see myself having and walking around with a physique like that?
And then
instead of thinking I need to look like that right now.
Something that helps me so much with that is looking at their off season too, because if this is something you're doing long term, like, are you comfortable with a certain amount of muscularity and body fat on top of that? Because like a woman's physique girl walking around in her off season is like, she's huge. Like, they're massive. So they have so much muscle mass. Is that something you want and desire? Is that exciting to you? Or would you rather have like maybe a little bit less muscle than maybe consider figure? So I feel like just looking at off-season physiques too has helped me a lot, because I think in the beginning, I was like, I kind of want to do figure. And then I was like around a lot of figure women, and I was like, you know what, maybe this doesn't align with like how I see my future physique. So take your future self into consideration.
That is true.
That's more long-term.
Because most of the time, like, you're going to be walking around with kind of like an off-season body. And when you're looking at people's stage photos at like the Olympia or something, or a pro show, that is like a snapshot of their absolute best physique that they're putting forward, where they spent a long time doing that. They're absolutely shredded, carb manipulation, salt, water manipulation to have this perfect physique. And then after that,
lighting, posing,
all of the stuff, hours of posing practice. So that's the divisions. Now there's something to consider is like, are you mentally ready for this? Because you are going to have some demons that come out, all of those things. I always like to say that with bodybuilding is like a flashlight. It will shine the light on the areas in which you've been avoiding addressing.
Well, that's like what you were saying before, where it's a different level of discipline. It's not like a journey where if you're in a normal weight loss journey, and we always talk about like consistency is like, just do your best, sweetie.
No,
Get back
it's
on
like
track.
don't mess up.
Yeah, bodybuilding's like you don't have an off day. You don't have like I think maybe some competitors up until a certain point might have a refeed on like 1 day a week, but most of the time you're going like prolonged months of like no cheat meals, no variation from your plan, cardio every training day. Like it's a different beast. And with that comes a lot of challenges, because usually if you mess up, you're like, oh, I'll just get back on track.
Yeah.
You have a deadline with this where it is a lot more pressure, and that
where
can
it matters more.
Yeah, that can create a lot of issues.
Yeah, that is like the real big difference, to where if you are cutting for just like for the summer or something, you can quote unquote slip up, mess up. You can have a free meal. With bodybuilding. Like, there is very little room for error, because every single thing that you do has an effect on that overall physique when you step on stage.
Yeah. Things just become more meticulous.
Yeah.
I remember having too many vegetables one day and beating myself up for it.
Well, because then you're too bloated. You know what I mean? Because
I was like, I went over on my broccoli.
You're not used to that. What? And then, now I'm bloated. That can potentially ruin my physique that I have on stage. So it's super granular. Yep. So I feel like defining your why is very important.
Oh, yeah.
Are you doing this because it's something like it's a bucket list thing and you want to see where you take it and you want to really challenge yourself and get all like the benefits of the journey? Or are you doing it for external validation, to prove somebody wrong? Like, because you just, want the trophy or the photo. Like, this is really important when you first get started, because you need a bigger, deeper reason why you're doing this, then I just want to like look shredded, because that can only take you so far.
Yeah.
That will not take you to where you need to be to have that 4 weeks out mentality to show day.
I also think creating a why tied more to the mental and to the discipline and to proving yourself something takes you a lot further than an external physique aesthetic type of goal or why, because again, like body dysmorphia is almost inevitable, and you need a deeper tie to why you're doing this when on those hard days you don't feel like you are making progress.
My body dysmorphia, oh, you know what, I'll talk about this actually when we go over because we're going to talk about things that we wish we knew. I'll talk about this later, but mine was so bad.
Me too.
Another thing to consider is like, how is your relationship with food?
This one's important.
This one's very important.
Because I'm someone who always thought I had like an okay relationship with food. And like you were saying, it shines a spotlight. I went very quickly, oh, no, I don't.
Bodybuilding is what helped me realize that I had a binge eating disorder.
Yeah, me too.
That I had been eating in this pattern since I was 15. I've been competitively dieting and like stepping on a scale like since I was 15, and I'm 27 now. And bodybuilding showed
That works.
a light on this thing
Shined.
that I shined.
I don't know.
Shown.
Just continue.
Words. It's lost all meaning. But yeah, it shined a light on something that has been there for years, that it's been lying dormant. And I had this moment of, oh my gosh, I love this sport so much and I want to do it so bad. Is this going to prevent me from doing it?
Yeah.
And I always tell people that for me, that thought of giving up something that I love so much because I had struggles with food was not an option.
Yeah.
So I was going to have to deal with that quote unquote demon, that shadow, that thing that I put a Band-Aid on for a long time. I'm eventually going to have to handle it. It can't stay in the shadows forever. And I spent a long time during lockdown and COVID, like getting help, figuring out where this came from. And for me, it was back when I started wrestling. Like I've been eating in this pattern for a long time. So we are really big on making sure that this is healthy, it's in a right place, because you go to the extreme.
Yeah.
So making sure you're okay there is really important.
Because if not, it will show up in prep.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, it will show up in post-show.
It'll show up
and
after.
Both of those are vulnerable times for yourself, where it's so much easier to be like, okay, let's not compete this year. Let's compete next year and spend this year really healing these relationships, because that'll make the prep you do so much easier.
Yeah.
So take the time you need now. Make sure you're in a good spot now before making it harder for yourself.
Yes. Listen to our series all the way through and then make your decision, you know? The next thing is comparison and perfectionism.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like this gets really heightened when you start bodybuilding, because you're new at this. And maybe you're looking at other people on social media that have been doing it for a while, or maybe you're even looking at people that like you might be competing against, or that are even I was once coaching this girl to a show, and she was doing this to herself. You know, I've had some friends around me too that were competing in other shows, and they just kept watching what everybody else was doing. They would find the people they were competing against and like where they were at. And the girl that I was coaching, I was like, we're done. We're done doing that. This isn't about their journey. You don't know where they've been. You don't know how long they've been doing this. None of that. This is about your individual journey and you being the best that you can be. Block out everybody else. So just think about that when you're doing it, because it's really important.
That was one of my things on things I wish I knew before starting prep, is I definitely was a comparison girl, where I remember being like 6 weeks out and literally going to like the hashtag 6 weeks out.
Oh my gosh.
Just scrolling through everyone and being like, that girl's way leaner than I am right now. And that girl, like, she has so much more size right there. And then it's so easy to not recognize your own journey, where like other people might look at you and think those same things. But if you're already having body dysmorphia and then you're like, and I don't look like these people, then you're just like setting yourself up for failure, or at least for a harder time. Like, why do that to yourself.
Well, it's like a confirmation bias. Like you're already feeling some type of way about your own journey, which that happens. It can happen. It happens to me almost every single year. And you're looking for that validation that what you're feeling is true. So if you're 6 weeks out and you feel like I'm not ready, I need to practice more posing, like I'm not muscular enough, then you go and you seek out reasons to make that true and to prove yourself right. Even if it makes you feel terrible. My pro show, my show that I got my pro card, 2 of my good friends, all 3 of us were competing in the same show for our pro card.
Remember this.
Yes. And all 3 of us completely different physiques.
Insanely
One of the girls
different.
is 4'11", and her glutes are absolutely insane. I'm 5'2". My quads are like my best feature. And then we had my friend who was 5 foot. How tall do you think she is?
She's a little shorter than me. I would say 5'5", 5'6". Yeah.
So like we were all like in kind of almost different categories. Like it was A, B, and C, or maybe it was like A and B. But it was hard for me not to do that during that time because not only were we all being coached by Zach.
Weren't you all staying in like the same Airbnb?
And we all stayed in the same Airbnb. And we were all like, but you know, we were really good friends, and like it was easy to just be there and support each other, you know.
But it also would have been easy to compare yourself.
Oh yeah, because they're right in your space. So if you're just doing that to yourself on social media or with your friends, just stop. Don't do that.
Why do it? And then the last thing is, are you willing to commit to the lifestyle beyond just show day? Bodybuilding is such a lifestyle shift, which in my head makes it easier because you're like, we're doing this forever. But for some people, if you aren't ready to literally like change your everyday routine and who you are as a person, maybe you're not ready to step on stage quite yet, because it goes past being there on show day. It is the months leading up. It's the months after. If you continue and you do like it, it becomes your entire life. Where like your identity is tied to bodybuilding. You're a
bodybuilder year round. You know, so anytime that I have clients that have interest in competing and they're just starting out, my first recommendation to them is you act like a bodybuilder right now. So that means like you're hitting your calories and macros perfectly. You're making sure that you're going and hitting your training sessions the best that you can. You're hitting your cardio sessions. You're waking up when your alarm goes off. You're drinking your water. You're taking your supplements. Like getting them in that habit of how long can you be that consistent with something? And then go into bodybuilding. If you're not consistent whatsoever right now and you jump into a prep,
it's going
to be very, very, very hard. So act like it now. Like when you're listening to this, start doing the habits that a professional bodybuilder would do and take it super seriously and get really good at just having that routine down so that when your prep does start, you're like, I've already been doing this. This is a piece of cake.
You also have to kind of be obsessed with it. Like you can't just be like today I'm going to be a bodybuilder. Like it has to consume you, but like in a good way. Like I view this as a positive because I'm like, making it your lifestyle does make it easier. Like preps are easier when you've already been doing all of the things. So I think just treating it like that, of being like obsessed with it every day. You wake up, that's your goal. That's what you're working towards. Like that's how you're moving and acting, is already like a bodybuilder.
What do you wish you would have known when you first started competing that you now know?
There's a lot. I was fortunate enough to I had just moved to Texas. I was going to Alpha Elite Gym, and at the time it was not Alpha Land, it was just Alpha Elite Gym. Like I think the first Alpha Elite Gym, where there weren't that many people that were members there, but the people that were members all did summer shredding and were all competitors. So I was around a lot of competitors and I got to ask a lot of questions, which I'm so grateful for. And hopefully this podcast and this series can be that for you and answer those for you. But I remember the first girl I went up to who had just done her first show ever. So she was like a good new competitor to ask. I was like, what would you tell like yourself before this prep? Or like, what would you tell me if I'm getting into it? Cause I think I was like 16 at the time. And she specifically said almost all the things we said. Make sure you have a good relationship with yourself and with food before getting started. She was super blunt and honest with me. And originally I walked away being like, oh, like I must not be ready. Or like, I like this must be too challenging of a thing, or like some of these things that might sound negative of what we've said so far. We're just trying to be realistic with y'all, where I'm so glad I had someone being realistic with me and being like, this isn't easy, because then I knew what to expect. If I didn't have that, I think I would have had a very different first prep. So I think like having those expectations helped me, and I'm glad I had those. Another thing was the body dysmorphia, which I know you have dealt with, so you can talk more on it, but just like understanding, you could go into a prep being like, I'm super confident and I love myself, and you're gonna have times in your prep where you just straight up feel awful and you are not seeing your physique how other people are seeing your physique. You feel like maybe you've plateaued completely. I remember my weight not changing for like 5 weeks in prep.
That happened to me too.
And me feeling devastated about it. But then I started, like, my coach helped me and opened my eyes and was like, look at these, looking at the comparison photos, a completely different physique where I was getting shredded, but sometimes the scale doesn't move. And you're like, what's that about?
I realized I was recomping for 5 weeks.
Exactly.
Where the scale was like, just like teetering between these 2 different pounds, but not really seeing anything change as far as the scale. That's why the scale is just one metric of success.
Yeah.
And my coach, honestly, like whenever I'm doing my check-ins for prep, he always tells that to me. He's like, this is just one of the metrics that I am using. And he's like, ultimately, I am looking for a specific look.
Yeah.
When I'm looking at your photos. And I'm like, cool.
Which we see it when we look back.
Yes.
But in the moment, like we've all done it, and I'm sure you listening have done it, even if it doesn't tie to a prep or bodybuilding, where you take a photo and you're like, oh, I look awful. And then you look at it 4 months later and you were like, what was I thinking?
Yeah, I do that a lot.
That's the best I ever looked.
I do that a lot now when I'm like in my off season, I'm at a healthy weight, I have more energy and, you know, more time on my hands. And whenever I'm looking at like, or I'm making like a Instagram posts like that was about my bodybuilding and stuff, and I'll look at some of the videos you took for me and remember how I felt about my body then and absolutely be like, I looked insane. And Kendall saw it, but I didn't see it. I didn't think I looked bad in that moment. It was more so I was stuck in the, it's not enough. It's not enough.
Remember you saying,
I need to look better.
I'm not ready, or I'm not gonna be ready. Like that term stuck with me my whole prep too, where I'm like, you're almost panicking the whole time of, am I gonna look ready?
Yes.
And odds are yes. You're gonna be fine.
Yeah, everybody has that moment where you're like, oh my God, am I gonna be ready?
Yeah.
Look. Yeah, so I'll look back at photos and be like, I looked like a freak.
In the best way.
In the best way. I looked like an absolute freak. Yeah. And I would look at myself in the mirror, because you're looking at yourself every single day.
Almost too much, because you're posing.
You're posing, you're
photos.
seeing in the mirror, you know, and all that stuff. So it's really hard to see yourself realistically when you just stare at the same thing every single day, versus say you see a friend that you haven't seen in a month, they would probably be a better judge if your physique changing than you would.
That too, I think something I wish I knew before prepping was making sure I had people in my corner that had my back, that when I did get like that could call my shit out or make me recognize what I was doing. I've done, I always mess it up. I think I've competed 5 times, and that was like 4.5 different preps, because one of the years was like a local show in the nationals. The rest were all like, that whole year was for one show.
Gotcha.
So I did like 3 of those in a relationship, and then I did one completely on my own. And that one completely on my own was definitely the most challenging, because as soon as I was post show, I was sitting in my apartment alone, and it was hard not having anyone there reminding me that I'm okay and that I'm getting healthy and that I am on track. And that's kind of when I got really into social media, because that became my accountability, where I shared that entire prep with other people online, because I was like, I don't have anyone in my immediate circle. So it doesn't necessarily mean you need to like live with someone or have like a best friend there every single day or every single week. But I think just having some sort of accountability and support system so that you don't feel alone during or after your prep is really important, because it is easy to spiral in those moments if you don't have like a reality check.
Yeah. There was a lot of times where I was like, Kendall, be honest with me. How do I look?
And I'm like, amazing.
Because I would literally tell her, I was like, I don't see it.
Yeah.
I have blinders on. I don't see it because I know that this happens. And she'd be like, dude, you're fine.
Yeah.
And even like my friend Alexa, Alexa, who's a figure pro, and we both have the same bodybuilding coach.
I always forget that.
Yeah. She would say, send me your check-in photos, okay? Because if I was like and she's like, you're going to be ready. You're going to be fine. And I was like, I don't believe you. And I ended up looking the best that I ever did.
Exactly.
So another thing that I wish that I knew is that muscle is going to take a lot longer to build than you think.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
Bodybuilding is not about how quick you can do it. It's like slow and steady wins the race. And lastly, wish I would have started posing sooner.
Same.
I like first show was you get so focused on just everything that comes with learning your first prep that you start scrambling for posing towards the end.
I think I started posing my first show like 4 weeks out.
Yes. And I'm like,
I was like, I should learn this now.
Yes. So I always tell like any of my clients that are thinking about competing, I'm like, start right now.
Yeah. And start in heels.
Start in heels.
Because I was like, I know my angles. I know my poses. Completely like even now. So I did when I did like a fake prep, this was for my YouTube channel. I did like a week in my old prep. Like I followed my old plan, which was so much fun. But that was the first week I had put posing heels back on. And I was like, wow, I do not remember how to walk, how to pose. Like you lose it so quickly. It's
so different posing in heels versus like your feet. Cause your feet on the floor, you just have so much more stability. Yeah. And like, of course you're going to hit them all insane. You put the heels on, you're like
a baby deer. It was awful.
Oh man. But yeah, that's everything for this first episode, guys. You know, just really consider like, is this sport for you? With everything that we talked about, with down to like the time, the sacrifices, the level of discipline that it takes. Like, is this going to fit into your lifestyle? Are you mentally ready for it? And we don't say any of this to like scare you or deter you from the sport. We just want to make sure that you're ready to go. And if you're listening to this and you're like, I'm ready, then we're so freaking excited for you.
If you hear the level of discipline it takes and you get excited instead of terrified, I feel like that's a sign in yourself where you're like, you are ready for that next step of challenge.
And if right now you're listening to this and you're like, ooh, I don't think I'm ready, that's okay. Act as if, and you still want to do it, act as if you're a bodybuilder right now. Like in these little areas,
start
like practice so that when you are ready, you're like, I got this.
Yeah. And now there's a division like the Fit Model division that will like really help you be an introduction to it where it is a little less scary. Which is good.
Big facts.
Yeah.
Well, we hope you guys enjoyed this first episode. We got 4 more for you coming every single Monday. If there's anything that you want us to talk about or to cover, just send us a message on our Instagram. It's linked in the description and stuff. But as always, we love you all so much, and you're more powerful than you think.
Bye.